Okay, good to go.
All right, I'm calling the meeting to order. The minutes from last week, was there any changes or additions?
I had one thing.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead, Jane.
I didn't get a chance to read, am I muted? No, I didn't get a chance to read them. Actually, I'm still at work today, so I've had no time and I apologize, but you can approve them without me if you'd like.
The only thing I had, OJ, and I unfortunately I printed these at home, so mine aren't numbered.
Mine aren't numbered either, so what paragraph or heading?
Page 3, last paragraph. It says Ham added that Director Tower is currently working. We need to cross that out and put has spoken with. And then with Jay Scambio, General Manager, Loon Mountain, for help determining a capacity, not to determine. At least that was her intention, and I don't know if she had already spoken with him yet or not, but it was not
Okay,
necessarily.
I'm
Yeah.
on that is on page 4. Sorry, I just now found it. Now start over.
Oh, mine printed small, so mine's on page 3. Sorry.
Okay.
All right. Ham added that Director Tower, cross out is currently working, and put has spoken with.
Okay,
And then the next line, cross out to determine and put for help determining.
okay. That makes sense.
Yep.
Do you have those changes and can get those to Jane?
Yes, I can email her. Yeah.
Okay.
And that was all I had. So I will make a motion to approve the October 26, 2020 meeting minutes as amended.
All right, I will second that. All those in favor, aye?
Aye. Jane, are you going to, you're muted, so we can't tell.
Abstain. Can I do that?
Okay. Yes, you can abstain, absolutely.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right. Raf Tellis is not online here yet.
Yep, Dave Fox is on along with Ray Cobra. I think, well, if I would suggest we let Ray lead it off and then Mr. Fox is here obviously to
Okay,
deal directly with your
Hi,
question.
OJ.
hi there. Sorry, you're on page 2 of my my Zoom. I didn't even see you there. Welcome.
No problem. How you doing?
Good.
Ray, if you're online, do you want to lead it off?
Sure, happy to. We're here tonight to talk about the rate structure, and I think specifically, as we understand it, the board had specific questions around I guess the best way I can term it is the shifting of the cost structure from the more seasonal population to the long-term residents. So is that kind of the issue at hand here? Do we understand that correctly? Okay.
Yeah, I would say that, and again, this was I think the concern that was brought to the Board of Selectmen by the Water Committee.
Okay.
Was that exactly what you stated, the shifting. And in the request of the Water Committee was to look at or have Raf Tellis propose a rate structure that may soften that with a set allotment of water usage as part of the fixed fee, which maybe the fixed fee goes up, but at least it includes a set allotment of water.
Correct.
And then have the variable parts start after whatever that set allotment is.
Okay.
So those kind of go hand in hand, those two parts.
So Dave and I had some opportunity last week to talk about that a little bit, and I'm going to turn this over to Dave in a minute here. But the thing that I want to just kind of put out there first, I would encourage the board first and foremost just to really what you want to look at this is really from two perspectives. Is you want to kind of think of this in terms of policy first. So you have to decide what again, it's kind of like what we talked more recently about the level of service when we were looking at the water storage tank issue. But so we think we should have a discussion around leading with policy and the objectives, and specifically around the two areas, one being conservation, the other one being financial sustainability. And then we can get into what does the cost structure look like with that shift, and how from a practical standpoint, what does that structure really look like, and what should it look like? So at this point, I think I'm going to turn it over to Dave, and Dave, maybe you can kind of lead into that portion of the discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Ray, for that. You're exactly right. I think it's prudent of us to maybe take a step back for just a few minutes, or maybe for more than a few minutes, and really address what the impetus is of making a change to the way in which you're currently charging customers for water and sewer service. Sorry, did somebody say something?
Oh, that was an echo.
Okay, great. And the reason for that is how we go about structuring what the rates look like could potentially have different results in terms of impacts to your customers, to your revenue stream, to your water demand, conservation efforts. I think it's important to recognize what are the goals of Lincoln, and recognize that it's impossible. I'll just go ahead and preface this. It's going to be impossible to have all of those goals accomplished 100%, right? It is absolutely a balancing act. If you want to have a very fixed revenue stream for revenue stability purposes, but you also want to incentivize conservation, you can't do both of those things. Not perfectly, at least, right? And by having a very fixed and stable revenue stream, you have a lot of your charges coming from fixed charges, or almost all of them. That's not going to send a pricing signal to anybody to incentivize conservation or reduce their water consumption. The flip side of that, if you looked at revenue stability compared to equity, having a completely fixed revenue stream or fixed charge, which doesn't really vary by customer, doesn't necessarily or perfectly recognize the demand that's being placed in the system by individual customers, and the different costs that different types of customers are incurring on the system. So what we try to do is hopefully allow you to prioritize what your objectives are in Lincoln. And as such, we can try to accomplish as many of those objectives as possible, or at least prioritize them, and try to accomplish the most prioritized, or the highest priority objectives through the rate structure, recognizing that it's not going to be perfect. You'll never have a perfect rate structure. I'll just say that from the beginning. But if we can understand what those goals and objectives are as those priorities, we can do our best to craft and structure rates and rate structures that are going to accomplish those goals. Now, the second part of that is, if we can come up with a rate structure that accomplishes those goals, is having you be okay with the customer impacts associated with them. Those are two completely different conversations. You can come up with a perfect or a somewhat perfect rate structure to accomplish as many goals as possible, and then you can look at those customer impacts and say, this is not what we wanted to accomplish, or not what we're looking for. I think too often we jump immediately, and I'm talking about, I do water and sewer rate studies for, I've done hundreds of them in my career. Too often the impetus of making a change, we think it's about having some of these priorities or trying to accomplish some of these priorities, but it immediately goes to what are the customer impacts, and let's just design a rate structure to result in these customer impacts that we want. This customer class getting benefit, and this customer class having all the impact be put on their backs. I think we can try to accomplish something like that, but I think you all be better suited if we can really try to focus in on what the key objectives are, other than those customer impacts. What are the key objectives that I talked about? Is conservation a key objective, which I've heard it has been. You all may, some may disagree with you or me on that, or what I've heard, but I've heard that conservation is a key issue in Lincoln. I've heard equity has been a key issue, and having two single family residential homes that are the exact same home, but one has a single individual in it and the other has six people. Those households probably, if they're there year round, are putting very different demands on the water and sewer systems. And as such, they, in my opinion, should be paying different charges to reflect that level of service. So equity is also a potential concern. But I went on a 5-minute rant there, so I apologize for getting on my soapbox. I'll stop for a few minutes. And I think that's really where I want to start this conversation as possible, is less about where the customer impacts are landing and more about, can we just take a step back and focus on what we think is important, what are the priorities, the objectives we should be trying to accomplish through making a change in billing methodology. And if we could start there, I think it's going to lead to a more productive conversation and hopefully a better fitting and better suited rate structure for the town.
One thing that may want to focus on is, what did we do the last time when we put meters in that system failed? And you probably don't want to do that again, but I don't know what it was.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's also going to, building on that point, it's going to cost you, our residents, a good deal of money to put in new meters and be able to read those meters. There's an upfront cost. Last we were talking about $1.2 million to do so. And then there's also an ongoing maintenance cost of being able to ensure that those meters are they're read, they're proper maintenance, so they have the right upkeep, so they continue to work, so you get good readings off them. Those meters are only good. It's only worthwhile having them in place if you actually have good data coming from them, and you can utilize that data to be able to bill customers off of it and have a more equitable and rate structure.
Hey, what is your feedback from other towns? Do you have any regarding once they implement it? I know many towns have already done this, and Lincoln's probably behind the 8 ball with this. But can you tell me what are some reactions from other towns when they have meters? And if it's on the same par as us, as far as having half seasonal and Moon Mountain is here and having them and all the businesses, what their thoughts are about it once they had it implemented.
Lincoln's definitely an anomaly with regard to your rate structure. Most municipalities have a rate structure that is already reflective of on the water side. Most rate structures, industry best practice, I would say, is some sort of fixed charge based on meter size and then a volumetric rate. That volumetric rate can be all over the place. It can be inclining block to incentivize conservation. It can be class-based. Residential customers are going to pay a different rate than commercial or industrial customers. But I would say the industry best practice and what we see most often is a fixed charge by meter size and then some sort of volumetric rate. On the sewer side, it's most common to also have a fixed charge by meter size and have a volumetric rate as well tied to water consumption. So we would bill for sewer based on water consumption, either 100% of water consumption or some subset of water consumption, maybe 80%, or if a customer has some sort of deduct meter, irrigation meter, only on that water that we know is going back down in the sewer system, water that's not just getting put on for irrigation purposes or for other non-sewer purposes. There's another question in there, Jane. It's Jane, right? I'm sorry.
Yes, that's
okay.
Wonderful.
I think your other question was what other communities are doing. You also have an anomaly with regard to your customer base and having it be incredibly seasonal. I have some other customers or clients who are on Cape Cod. For example, they have a very seasonal rate structure or a seasonal customer base. There's 3 months of the year where everybody's there, and then the remainder of the year everybody's gone except for the residents, and it's actually few and far between for most of those, for most of that client base. What they try to do is exactly what you're thinking about, or at least some of the feedback that I've heard of, trying to put the onus on customers who are only there for part of the year, the seasonal customers. There are different ways of doing that. The most common is to have a seasonal rate, and have that seasonal rate be much higher. If that's a volumetric rate, have that seasonal rate be much higher for a period of time where we know customers are most likely going to be in town, that in-season period. We would define that, we can find that a little more easily for, for Cape Cod with the summer periods. That's also going to impact, though, customers who are there year round. So if you have a higher volumetric rate for, say, a 3-month period for water consumption and subsequently for sewer consumption, that's not only going to apply for those apply to those seasonal customers. It's also going to apply for the year-round customers that just happen to be using water and sewer service during that seasonal time. It can be done, but it doesn't usually result in the shift of costs that is looked for.
Right. That's the first I've heard of it. I remember hearing of it. I didn't think of that at all as far as increasing the rates during seasonal time, actually. But thank you for that. That's good information. Thank you.
Sure.
And OJ, if I may. I think, Dave, for interest, when the water meter, the best that the current staff in town hall can determine, the meters that were put back in, I don't know, somebody help me here, in the 90s, whatever it was, the panel or the review committee that had done that, they got it on a grant, the meters were put in, but the same issue is there could not be a decision on whether to charge, so the meters were strictly in place to gather, monitor usage, and gobs and gobs of data apparently would, through the old printer system, were done, and we had staff that went around to each business and home and put a meter against the wall, and I'm simplifying it, but it was just data. It was never a fee system put in, thus they went with the current system. So that's, in a nutshell, how that first round went. It was a federal grant with there was some cost, I think, but little cost to the community. And then it just became antiquated, and they quit doing it when the technology ran out. So that's how that all happened.
So if I can just, OJ, if I may just interject and put something in front of Dave. So, I mean, the question that was kind of posed here that we wanted to talk about is, can we, again, for lack of a better way to put it, can we shift the costs to those seasonal customers, from the seasonal customers to, or from the, shift it away from the year-round customers onto the seasonal customers? And I think, Dave, could you speak to, because I mean, there's no reason to do meters if you're not gonna drive the conservation initiative. And Dave, can you speak to the question on the table with respect to the structure between fixed and variable, and how that impacts the conservation side of the equation?
Sure. If you're not billing your customers based on their actual water consumption, they have no incentive at all to conserve water or use water responsibly. If it's just based on a fixed charge, it does not matter. Those customers can just use water as much as they want, and they're going to pay the same rate. Or they can use water irresponsibly, just waste water, have water just be pumping out into the ground. It does not matter. They're going to pay the exact same. By billing those customers based on water consumption, which water meters would allow you to do, it provides a direct economic incentive to customers to use water at least more responsibly, and understand if they're wastefully using water. In some cases, it can actually just, customers who are already maybe using water efficiently or responsibly can send an even a stronger pricing signal to them to do so. For those customers who are using water fairly responsibly and efficiently now, you'd have to really jack water rates up a lot to be able to provide an even stronger pricing signal. And I don't think that's what we're trying to do here. I think we're just trying to provide for a reasonable or adequate level of responsibility in terms of water consumption, or I could be wrong, but that's what I've heard, such that you're running into some capacity issues, some water demand capacity issues, and by having no incentive at all for your customers to use water responsibly, it's flying directly in the face of doing anything to be able to support remedying that situation in the short term, really in the long term as well.
So I think, I mean, the way I would think about this is, OJ, because when you pose the question about can we have a, you know, the way I understood is, can we have a higher, you know, fixed rate volumetric as a fixed rate charge, so that and a less of a variable rate charge. And under that scenario, you just, again, as David said, you're just not going to achieve what we understand anyway. Your primary objective is here is to, you know, put meters in order to drive conservation. If the rate structure is structured so that, you know, you have a, you know, you have a high volume, you know, a high number associated with the amount of water that's going to be fixed, you're just not going to achieve the objective that you want to achieve. So that's why we wanted to focus on the policy end of it first, before we spend too much time on crunching the numbers. Does that make sense?
Building on that, Ray, it's by shifting, if we were to set up a water rate structure that was heavily shifted to fixed to try to shift the cost burden onto customers who are only there part of the year seasonally, that you're right, Ray, that does not achieve your goal of conservation, nor does it really achieve the goal of shifting costs from year-round customers to seasonal customers. Because if you're jacking up those fixed charges, the season or the year-round customers are going to pay those fixed charges as well, and they have no ability to control their bill. They can't conserve, they can't reduce their consumption, which in turn allows them to reduce their bill. It doesn't do the, it doesn't achieve the goal of the cost shift that some think it might.
Right. One of the things, oh, I'm sorry, Paul. One of the things that my understanding is with all this water is it should, in my opinion, it should be conservation, because for years we had plenty of water and now we have no water. So this is what's forcing the need for meters, I think, is conservation, because we have so many more people in town and so many more tourists. So I think that's based on conservation. That's the reason I would put in meters, to conserve water so we don't run out. That's just my opinion.
And I would just add that part of the calculus in terms of costs on your year-round residents is you got to keep in mind the capital expenditures. That's what's going to drive your overall cost structure. It's not what you're spending on electricity so much or chemicals, although those are important components. What's really going to bend the cost curve for your overall operation is to forestall and put off those capital expenditures necessary to meet your increasing demand. So that's why, you know, conservation to minimize those capital expenditures should be, again, it's a, you know, it would be, it's on the policy side of the discussion, and that's why we think, you know, if that's the objective, then, you know, build your rate structure to meet your objective. Don't try to figure out a rate structure and then try to fit it in on the back end, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you.
Paul. OJ. Unfortunately, I think the horse has left the barn here. I mean, the town of Lincoln has allowed so much building to happen. We have a lot of second homes that are partially occupied during seasonal times. But however, when we build these homes, they are designed with the water usage taken into consideration. No one, when someone comes to build a house at, and I'll pick on South Peak, they build this house, 6,000 square foot house. The town knows that there's X amount of fixtures in there and that they're going to use a lot of water. They have the ability to, if they decide they want to come up here year round, the town doesn't take into consideration that it's a seasonal one. I think the fallacy here is that we have used that over here and said, oh, they're only seasonal homes, so we'll just keep building. And what we've gotten ourselves into is the fact that all of these seasonal homes are becoming used more and more for the wrong terminology, VRBO or whatever, what do you call those again?
Short-term
Short-term
rental.
rentals.
Short-term rentals. But I mean, so now all of a sudden, these, what we thought were seasonal homes are being used a lot. And so we're using a lot more water. You know, probably what we did, in my estimation, is we just kept handing it out until, you know, we probably should have done this a long time down the road. I do think that a base charge along with a volumetric charge does allow you to do some conservation in a way. And I also have a concern about once and I'm kind of sort of on the line with meters, because I don't know after the implementation, who regulates, how do the increases happen? Or is it gonna cost the town a lot more because we're gonna have a lot more employees, a lot more maintenance to the meters? So I mean, there's a lot of variable questions here. So, but I think that, you know, like I said, I think the fact that we have, I'm all for the conservation aspect, but we've got a lot of houses here that are being used more and more and more. And I think that's where we've had the problem. And I don't know that it's how charging is going to stop that. I think we need to look at, I think Butch said it, what does the town of Lincoln want to be? Where do we want to, you know, where do we want to be? Are we built out, or should we slow down a little bit, take a charge of where we're at, see what we have for supply versus what our demand's going? I mean, our demand right now is continuing. I mean, people are building all over the place, and we're not saying no, we're just letting them build. And we don't even know if we've got enough to let them build. I mean, to supply fire protection, supply sewer. I mean, a sewer treatment plant is $8 million. So, and obviously that's a bond, and OJ brings up really great points all the time about whether the fees that we have for tap fees are for future or to help pay what's here now. And I think that's what confuses a lot of taxpayers. It confuses me. So when I go to look at it, the bottom line is I look how it affects my bottom line. Now I figure I've already paid. I don't need to pay for any more. And I think that's what a lot of the people who are going to go vote are going to look at. And that's what to me, this committee needs to take that into consideration. And that's part and parcel to why it didn't go. I was on the last committee for this thing. And that's the reason it didn't go, was because the local people didn't have a palate for it. They didn't have a palate for more charges, for more increases.
The other problem you got is how do you get all these visitors that come up during the summer and the fall, and how do you get them to conserve? Because they've got no money in the bank on it. They don't care. They just let the water run. There's probably 3 times more visitors into the Lincoln than the town of Lincoln has for population.
Easily.
One of the major issues that we face in the winter is the condos that were built in the 80s when electricity was really cheap. Have a lot of electric heat in them. So when they have renters come up, they literally leave signs that say, turn the hot water heater off, to put the heat down to 40 and let the water run in the bathroom and in the kitchen, and it just runs and runs and runs. We have seen that firsthand. We start charging those people and for water consumption, and they're not going to let the water run. It's going to be, you know, they're going to find a cheaper way to heat their house or their condo instead of letting the water run constantly. And every little bit as far as water conservation helps. If we can stop that in the winter with, you know, the dozen or so condos that we know are doing this, that's going to help immensely, in my opinion.
I mean, it's not even, Timmy, you're right. I mean, it's not even just there. It's at the town does it. I don't know if they still do it at the solid waste facility, but we used to run water there so it wouldn't freeze. But Dave, I have a question for you. Is there a way, I mean, so when you design a rate structure, can you design it so that it is based upon every home and their size, and can they get a base rate based on what they're designed to use, and then anything over that they pay a usage fee, an over usage fee on? I mean, the town of Lincoln designed these houses are there. We said it's okay to come in. They can use a certain amount, but if they use over that. So if what Tammy is saying is, you know, someone turns their heat down, and they have a 3-bedroom house, they're only supposed to use X amount of gallons of water. So if they use over that X amount of gallons of water, then we start charging them a lot of money so that they only use just what they're supposed to use.
Yeah, those rate structures do exist. They're pretty uncommon. They're more common utilizing meter size rather than number of bedrooms or fixtures or what is typically used for providing the necessary information for a capacity fee or system development fee to look at how much capacity those homes actually have. That information is less commonly used for actually structuring the rates themselves going forward. But having a minimum charge, if you will, based on meter size. So 5/8 inch has less capacity than a 2-inch meter. Bigger property, more capacity, more ability for them to use water consumption. The capacity is there. The costs are there associated with providing that capacity. That's pretty common in the industry, having a fixed charge with a minimum allowance in there based on meter size. There's two issues with it. One, minimum allowances. If a customer is using much less than what their allowance is, again, they don't have any ability to control their bill. They can't reduce their bill because of that. They don't, if they're within that allowance as well, they don't have any incentive to conserve or reduce if they're underneath that allowance. 3, which is more a Lincoln specific issue, is I don't have water data with enough detail to support that level of analysis to know what those, how many homes are going to fall under that minimum allowance in terms of their actual consumption. The water data that we have is so old and so unreliable that to be able to set up any tier, if you will, or any structure where we're having to make some predictions of how many customers are above their allowance or below their allowance, I'd feel very uncomfortable giving you a rate that says that to be able to support a level of revenue without that level of information, which we're not going to have until we get better meter readings.
So now I still have one other question
Sure, Paul.
along with your meters and how you charge. So, and I know it's going to be a real cumbersome process to start off with, but is there a way to take, I know, for example, the town of Lincoln charges certain rates for bedrooms and they charge water tap fixture fees. Is there a way to design a charge based on bedrooms and fixtures in a house and say, here's your base charge based on how many bedrooms and how many water fixtures you have in your house, so that we know that there's a 6-bedroom house, it's got 3 bathrooms. Granted, there may be more people in there and all, but I mean, they're not all going to be doubling up in the showers. So, so based on what the average is, and I know there's anomalies here and there, but based on the average of what that is, if you take the fixtures that they have and the bedrooms that they have, and this doesn't also, I mean, you can throw a monkey wrench into it about commercial. I'm just thinking about residential because Lincoln's mostly residential. Could we do something like that?
Short answer, Paul, yes, you could. The longer answer is going to get into some of the issues that you just brought up, the anomalies, and the big upfront question of what is the administrative burden necessary to be able to gather all that data to support rate structure of that nature. If you have those data that are recent and readily available, yes, we can do something like that. That kind of rate structure is more common on the sewer side for much smaller systems. They'll have just flat charges based on the number of bedrooms in a residential home. They'll have flat charges based on the number of seats in a restaurant, the number of seats in a church, the number of machines in a laundromat. Getting into some of the commercial things you brought up, Paul. There are ways of doing that. It's just administratively burdensome upfront to be able to get those data to support that rate structure in such a way that you feel comfortable with it. But the short answer is yes, you could do that.
So just a couple of thoughts here. Going back to the question that John asked a while ago was, why didn't this pass back in the 90s when we first put the meters in, there was a lot of discussion, debate, and differences of opinion over the water rates and should we charge, shouldn't we charge. But at least my recollection is it all came down to the same thing, the shift of the burden from the seasonal, expensive home to the year-round lower price homes. It was going to shift the burden down to the year-round residents who live in the year-round, less expensive on average homes. And that's why, again, in my recollection, it didn't pass. I think that same thing is going to happen to us again if we don't do something to make that shift less dramatic. And again, I go back to if we do an allotment, and again, I think the allotment should be based on the water pipe size, not bedrooms and number of sink fixtures or whatever, but the water, just because it's easy to tell what the water pipe size is, and we already know that. But anyway, if we had the allotment, I think there'd be slightly less conservation because, let's say you gave whatever, 40,000 gallons. Well, up to the first 40,000 gallons, I'm not going to be real concerned. But I don't think that those are the numbers where we're going to get big conservation. I think it's the thing that Tammy mentioned of condos running water for 4 months out of the year, 24/7. Or for other people who use water outside or just more liberally. I think that this drought this year was, at least for me, a real good lesson. I don't want to do it again. I've already learned, but the drought was okay this year in that it showed that this town can reduce its water usage. When we enacted the water ban, we reduced the daily water usage, and most of that ban was during what was probably the busiest September this town has seen that I remember. I mean, the amount of people in this town in September was ridiculous. And yet we reduced our water usage. Well, that tells me that people will conserve, and that a monetary incentive to conserve is even going to drive that further. They just did it now because we asked them to. We did have a ban on outdoor watering, non-essential watering, but money's going to speak louder than the Board of Selectmen. If you're going to get charged for that water. So I guess I think that the way to get this accepted by the people who are going to vote for it is to give them an allotment of water that says, okay, for the first, I'm just making up a number here, 40,000 gallons, it's covered in your set fee. Okay, now people who might only use 35 might not conserve at all. They're fine. But I think the majority of people will have to set into motion either some sort of conservation measures, which is what we want, or they're going to pay extra. In those houses with 6 and 8 and 10 bedrooms, even though they're seasonal, like Paul said, they're being used more and more for vacation rentals, Airbnb, VRBO, whatever. That with 10 bedrooms, they're going to go over that allotment even if the house isn't used year round. And so they will contribute to this also. So it doesn't shift the burden quite as much, but it does give the locals some, I think, just satisfaction that, okay, if we conserve and we use just this amount, we don't pay any more than the fixed fee. I think that's the way to get this accepted into the town politically. I think it will induce conservation, maybe not as much as a complete volumetric charge, but if we go with the complete volumetric charge, I don't think it's going to pass.
OJ?
I agree.
Yep. Go ahead, Butch.
Yeah, Dave, as a thought, and this goes to the way we currently have tap fees for water and sewer.
Yep.
That are earmarked for expansion or improvements to our water and wastewater system. If the base charge slash per gallon charge was based on the cost to operate our water and sewer systems annually, divided by the gallonage that we use, and I'm talking over my head here, but if we had a model where the folks could see that what it costs us to operate is what their water rates would make on. So we still have our system of new homes are paying their share to tie in,
Yeah.
and that is put in, as it is now, it's put into accounts that are used for expansion. But then once they're in the system, the people that are using water going forward pay based on the cost to operate. Is that a model that maybe you've worked at, and is that a viable way to look at it or not?
I think that's the exact way you need to look at that, Butch. I mean, growth, in my opinion, growth should pay for growth. New customers should pay for that cost associated with that growth. Those new customers coming on board and the capacity to provide them service. You shouldn't be relying on your tap fees or system development charges, capacity fees, whatever you want to call them, to generate money to run your operations on an annual basis. That should be coming from user charges. So yeah, setting up something and saying these are all of our operating expenses, our existing debt service, on just ongoing maintenance costs, annual costs. This is how much it costs to run the system. Now, some of that is going to, Paul brought it up. You're going to at some point need a new wastewater treatment facility. I'm modeling it. He said $8 million. I'm modeling it $10 million, somewhere in that range. I mean, that's not an insignificant cost. That's going to benefit everybody, but it is going to somewhat benefit those new customers coming on board. If you continue to grow, those new customers are going to drive the need for you to have that additional capacity to provide them additional sewer service. Same thing with water, to have the capacity to provide them additional water service, and they should pay for that. But you have to really look at it almost on a capital by capital project, or a project by project basis, to determine, is this project is going to benefit everybody in the system, old customers and new customers? Is this project solely to provide additional capacity for new customers coming on board? If so, then fees should be set accordingly to have those new customers pay for those capital projects alone. But if it's something that everybody should benefit from, or everybody is going to benefit from, existing and new customers alike, then you spread those costs around. And typically, something like $8-10 million, you're going to bond that. You're exactly right. You're going to spread the costs over a 20-30 year period. And everybody will pay for it. You're going to pay more long term in terms of interest, but it makes a heck of a lot of sense to do that.
So, a lot of the current sales that are happening in Lincoln are probably people who have enough wealth to be able to sustain a minor increase in whatever charges they have. Should we, and Dave, this question is for you, should we, is there a way, or should we look at saying, if you want to come in as a new homeowner, the charges are a little more? Or can you say that? Or is that, I mean, do you not do that? I mean, Lincoln's kind of at that rate where they could kind of look at it, and some of this comment's been the basis for, where does Lincoln want to be? I mean, are we okay now? Do we want to keep continuing growing, and at what rate? So do we say if you want to join on now, it's going to cost you more? Or, I mean, because our future costs are going to be one heck of a lot more than what we've paid in the past for any type of improvements that we have.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's nice that everybody wants to come to Lincoln and be in Lincoln and do everything they want to do, but sometimes in order to play, you have to pay. And the houses that are going up around here, I see are, at South Peak or anywhere else. I mean, they're $1 to $2 million houses. So to pay a little more money for water, their taxes are a heck of a lot lower than their water rate. I mean, than anywhere else where they're living now. That's why some of them want to come to Lincoln. So to up the charge a little bit, is that bad? I don't know. I'm asking you.
I'll give you my perspective from as a rate consultant, as a politician. I think there's a policy question in there too, Paul, that I'm gonna step away from. I'll let the politicians answer that one. Um, I think it's okay to charge them more of a upfront cost, more of like a system development charge. Those are typically set in two ways. One, to retroactively charge a new customer for the buying into the capacity of the system that the existing ratepayers have been paying for, and paying into the system, investing into the system for, since its inception. That's, one way. Actually, there's three ways. It's one way is kind of buying into capacity that's already there. The other is the incremental approach, or if you're going to, like I was saying, if you need additional capacity, you need additional capital infrastructure to provide service to these new customers, you charge them for that. And then there's a hybrid approach where you kind of mix the two, where you say you're going to buy into the system that's already here, and you're also going to have to pay for these new capital improvements that are we're having to undertake solely for you. To charge them a different volumetric or a higher volumetric rate just because they're a new customer, I think you're going to find yourself in some muddy legal waters there.
Okay, so then my next question would be for OJ and Butch. Do you think that the majority of the new water demand in Lincoln is residential, or is it because we've got 2 or 3 hotels, whatever, coming online?
You want me to go first? I don't.
You're asking us to predict the future. I mean, none of those hotels have been built yet.
No, I'm asking you based now. I mean, Lincoln has 1, 2, 3 hotels, three big, huge hotels, which have a lot of water demand coming into it. In a proportionate amount, how much truly is the 20, 25 houses that are being built or whatever? I mean, there may not be that even that many, but should we look at more the commercial base of this as well? Because that is really, really affecting us currently, because we have the Riverwalk, we have, the hotel up here by the ski slope, and then we have the other hotel.
So
Those hotels are really driving a lot of, their usage is big, huge. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, but what are the costs of the town to supply water to those? We have enough capacity at the water treatment plant. We have enough capacity for domestic water use purposes in our tanks, and for the most part, we have pipes to distribute it. So the incremental cost to feed those hotels, what is it?
And I think if I heard Dave correctly, it just jumped out at me was what the issue is for folks, anyone, whether it's a private home or a Riverwalk or a large hotel, what is the cost to buy into our existing system? And maybe, and I don't know the answer to this because it just occurred to me now, is our current tap fees, we've gone up a little since 8 years I've been here. Maybe the cost to tie in is not big enough, so that we're building a pool to handle these improvements. I'm starting to ramble, but as opposed to the ongoing daily usage of current customers here, and what do we put for a price on that to pay for the operation, maintenance, that stuff. Do you see where I'm going? I think maybe we have not the elephant in the room, but the question is, and I wish I knew the answer. Maybe OJ, I think this board, current BOS, I think we adjusted our tap fees recently. Maybe the issue is, and I'm not sure that's something that should go into Dave's work, or we could ask with a little more money, ask Dave to look at it, Dave and Ray, is maybe we're not maybe we're not charging enough by today's numbers for people to buy into what you folks have all paid for over the years that's sitting here currently. Maybe. I don't know the answer to that, but does that make sense, or am I off base? But I think we may be talking two different things. So I think the meters and the base rate / usage should match our annual cost to operate a system. And to me, if we go on that, that should self-adjust as the cost of peanuts goes up, and it just salaries and just inflation and stuff, that the water rates would, and then our expansion, even to the point where we have to say upgrade our either by usage, or the higher likelihood is our sewer system is going to have to be updated by state or federal mandate because of environmental changes and stuff. Then that would be spent over, as Dave or somebody said, would be spread over a 20 or 30-year bond in all likelihood, and everybody would pay. So that could be what this has turned up. So we still need to, in my opinion, meter water and charge, but we're setting fees, and there are going to be winners and losers, but we would be basing the fees on the cost to operate the system, not improve the system. We should be getting sewer and tap fees for new additions to water or sewer from the tap fees, or bonding for something really huge. I'll shut up.
Can I just say something real fast?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
It almost seems like what you want to do is prevent waste. And it almost seems like you need some way to meter people on a per unit time. For instance, a weekend, from a Friday to a Sunday night, and what's your consumption during that period. And then the other time would be maybe during the week, the 5 days during the week. And then when you if these things are electronic and you can capture the usage electronically on a 3 or 4 day basis or a weekly basis, you could call out or bill people for a higher rate when they're using a tremendous amount in that 3 day weekend. And that would at least kind of reduce consumption somewhat when the owner got the bill the next day, or the end of the month, and he sees what's going on in the place he's renting. Maybe very difficult to do, I don't know.
Almost like demand charging for electricity.
Yes,
It's very expensive to do.
it is.
On the water side, setting up a rate structure and a
Well,
billing
I tried.
to be able to do that. That's
Good. It's a good idea. I mean, the technology we were talking about putting in is pretty advanced. It sounds like it's a great idea, John. Just to Dave's point, yeah.
Yeah, and I think another big thing is to go to the hotels or condo associations that have buildings that, in order to save on electric rates, the owners are running their water for 2 to 3 months during the winter, or during the summer, or winter, mostly the winter, just so they can save on electric. That would show up quickly, the excessive usage, and we could work with the Public Works Department could work with each association to identify those abuses and probably put a halt to it pretty quick, or just a broken line that nobody even knows about. That's
Right.
running water, which happens. We're in, that happens everywhere, and there's no clandestine reason for it. We just have a broken water line. So there's a real plus to accurate metering. And I think to wrap it up, and I think what we're keeping Dave on is to see what model needs to come forward. And I think, my position hasn't changed. I think we need to meter, but there are going to be winners and losers. And that was identified back in the 90s when they had this program. we'll just, you know, there's going to be winners and losers, and I don't know how else to say it, but I think there's some great ideas that have come up, and hopefully we can get the most out of Dave's work and give us something to start with. That's the best we can hope.
Can we, hey Butch, can I ask you a question? Can we get data from other people? Well, I mean, I know we could. They need to offer it up, but we've said this a few times during some of our meetings, and I mean, right next door in Woodstock, they meter, they charge, they have a base rate. I think as OJ and Paul have talked about. A few of us have talked about, at least myself, because I used to live there years ago. It never seemed like you used the amount of water that you were allotted. And is there a way to talk to one of these other towns that are similar to us, not the same? I know we're kind of unique with our tax base, but to find out how close we can get to that base where people will start to be over and have to pay extra or not, and start out this process better off, Dave. I know you don't have a lot of information, but I worry that if we were able to get this through a vote, it's going to take X number of years to really get to a point where we're going to be able to push conservation. And that's a concern of mine.
Jay, I mean, you bring up a good point, and I said before, I've done hundreds of rate studies. I have data on every single one of those communities, and I could find data to support. I mean, I could just off the top of my head tell you approximately how much a single family residential home with 2 people in it is going to use on a monthly basis. 3 family home, a 4 family home. It's not going to be perfect, but I think we could get you pretty darn close to coming up with assumptions of how we're going to potentially model something like OJ brought up before, and Paul brought up, of having some sort of fixed charge with an allowance included and have everything above that at a premium volumetric rate. We can model it. It's going to come with a heavy caveat for me, though, that it's not going to be perfect. And we're going to need to update it as soon as you have actual reads from customers once those meters are put into place, and we can make an adjustment accordingly. Potentially either, it's probably going to be the cutoff is going to be reasonable. Where we set that cutoff for a single family residential home is not going to be the issue. I doubt we're going to move where that cutoff is. What we're going to move is potentially the pricing of the consumption above that to be able to reflect either upwards or downwards the additional revenue needed to support the general revenue requirements on an annual basis. What I would do, like I said, it's going to come from a heavy caveat of these are what our assumptions are. If these, if this doesn't, if the consumption doesn't fall into this, we're going to be off. We'll obviously try to be a little conservative and assume less consumption, less of that premium consumption above the minimum allowance, such that you'll have a higher volumetric rate. So if we're wrong, which we're going to be wrong, we're just trying to mitigate how wrong we are. If we're wrong on the right side, and you maybe generate a little more revenue than you needed in that first year, and put that into a reserve fund or use it to offset some capital improvement in a further year, or rate stabilization or something like that. But it can be done, and again, with some assumptions, but we can definitely model something like that.
Great.
Go ahead, Paul.
Well, Jay, the 2 things I've heard tonight, or the one big thing I've heard tonight, actually came from you, is that, so I don't know how many people are on this page we're on tonight, but we all have different ideas, or we all have things that we want to contribute, and think that it should be part of the charge. But the one thing I will tell you is that everything I've heard tonight is that the local population is going to vote on this. And OJ, you said this, the local population is going to vote on this. And if we do not give the local population what they want, they will not vote on this. And the second thing I think is that they can be convinced to vote to do some sort of a charge or to set up some sort of a system. But I think the other thing you need is that after the system is set up and the charges are made, they need to feel comfortable that they're not going to just go off this way and it's going to increase exponentially, or they're not going to have a say in it. So I think, to me, the 2 important things are, We need to take care of the local population in whatever way that is. And second, we need to make them feel comfortable that, you know, we're not going to get it all right the first time. But no matter what we do, we're going to come back to you, or we're going to adjust it, and you're going to have a say in how that gets adjusted. And I think with those two things, we can move on. I think we could have a charge, and the charge could be, you know, while it may not be perfect from what I'm hearing from everybody here or there, because there's so many different variables, we could still, the biggest thing is that there's a way to correct it, there's a way to modify it, but that you'll have local input. And I think I think the biggest concern is no matter what rate you put in there, you may not have local input, and these people are kind of afraid, oh my God, once I get this in, it's going to grow, it's going to have tentacles. I'll start with a $5 charge and tomorrow it'll be $100. So, you know, I mean, if we can address those two issues, I really think that we can move forward, and that we could do something.
Yeah, and I think, Jay, I think our neighbors have got a couple of years or more under their belt charging for water in Woodstock now, I think.
Yeah.
And Nate's on, and I don't know, but I would think we could inquire. While they're not an identical town to us, obviously, because of the commercial, but we'll see what we could get for data. And a lot of the full-time residents are of the same mindset that are in, you know, here in Lincoln, to Paul's point. So we certainly could look at that. It's a local, I'm not sure Dave would have that community in his data bank. Maybe he does, I don't know. But we could, and I'll certainly talk with Nate tomorrow and see if he could talk to the folks in the water department over there, see what data they're willing to release or anything, and see how it goes. I think that's a valid point.
I like the point that Jay made regarding that too. I own property in Woodstock, and I can tell you I was really scared about paying for water, but it's never gone above what the flat rate was, and it's very, very affordable. In Berlin, I own property, and they just pay right from every drop you use, and sometimes it's behind, and sometimes it's ahead. They fluctuate like off and on, off and on. So, you know, I like the idea what OJ said about having a flat rate, because there's some security in that as a homeowner. You know you're going to get this much, and if you get over, then you pay for the overage. I like that piece of it. The bill is much more stable, and I can depend on it, you know.
Oh, this is Ray. I have a question then for Dave. Dave, does it make sense to maybe work up maybe 3 scenarios on between the flat rate, variable rate, like what we talked about? You know, one rate could be 20/80, another one could be 50/50, and the other one could be 80/20. See what that looks like in the community and bring that information back. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, Ray. I think including an additional scenario there, perhaps just a modified scenario of what you just said, of having a usage allowance included in that fixed charge. So it's not just 20, 50, 80, it's 20, 50, 80 with some allowance included in that charge, and, you know, with and without. So you can see what the impact is with the allowance, without the allowance, and make a policy decision accordingly. I think we have generally, I don't know if I could probably put in some sort of request maybe to you, Butch, some, assessor's information, get some information on the individual properties, just the types of homes, the types of properties. We can make a determination of splitting up the volumes that I'm using for my model now, and give us a little bit more precision about that issue that I'm talking about, of knowing, you know, how many properties are going to fall below the minimum or above the minimum, how much above the minimum. We can make some more, slightly more precise assumptions there, and then turn around some scenarios for you to review and see what the customer impacts are accordingly.
And I don't know what your thoughts are for an allotment, but I'm thinking that if you take a 2 people average home, you would probably not want to do 100% of what that average is, but maybe 75% or 70%, so that those who use, much lower than average get no additional fee. But even if you average, you're going to pay some volumetric charge because again, if like, Jane was saying, if you never pay a water bill, you're not going to even try to conserve.
You want to give some incentive, OJ, but you also want to be able to say something that you said earlier, tell the public, hey, if you use below this, this is what you're going to pay, period.
Right.
Yeah. But you still want to provide that incentive.
Yeah, but I don't agree with a 2-person. I think you go to a 4-person because you got a mother, a father, and there may be 2 kids. So I think of the locals, they're going to look at it as 2-person going, yeah, this isn't going to do me anything. Give them a little bit for the children. Mother, father, 2 children, work on that.
So in my experience, a typical single family residential home, just looking at a distribution of consumption, you just look at the median, the 50th percentile, it's typically anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 gallons per month.
And again, whatever that number is, I would use a percentage of it just to encourage. Okay.
Understand.
Yep. All right. I think this is a good discussion. Ray and Dave, do you have any other either questions or direction needed or final comments?
Well, I think one of the things that just maybe briefly, Dave and I talked a little bit about the financial sustainability of the current model. In terms of, you're basically getting all your revenue from your tax base and also from the connection fees. So I guess the question I wanted to put on the table is what happens when the music stops? What happens when the development stops? How do you fund your operations going forward without a rate structure? So Dave, if I can ask you if you can just comment on that briefly.
Yeah, and I think generally around the room, I don't think anybody, I don't know how much time we need to spend on that because tell me if I'm wrong, but I didn't hear any strong opposition of moving to some sort of user charge. It's just exactly how we do that. And I think everybody's generally on board with doing it. It's just, what are the impacts associated with doing so on customers and ensuring that it's palatable and politically acceptable. But I think taking that off the table, it seems like a no-brainer to move to this new system. From what Ray's talking about, it's going to give you the ability to do a little bit more long-term financial planning, to not wait until you have a capital improvement right in front of you. Something's coming in 10 years. You can start planning for it. You can tell your public why. Tell your public what you're doing. Paul, you can tell them, hey, we have a $10 million project coming in 5 years. We're going to start putting some money away for it today. So we don't have a huge spike in rates. And here's what our rate plan is going to look like. Put out a 5-year plan. It allows you to potentially go out and get some grant money if it ever comes back to the water and sewer utilities, low interest loans, things that you're not currently eligible for with your existing revenue stream. You'd be eligible for under this new scenario. So I think it opens the doors for you. It's just it's coming back to what I talked about at the very beginning of my ramble is, it always comes down to the customer impacts. As much as you want to try to say, this is what we're trying to accomplish, it always comes down to the customer impacts. And we're going to try to the best of our ability, come up with something that hopefully the public can buy into, that you all can buy into from a customer impact standpoint. And you're going to get some of those ancillary benefits as well that we're hoping to accomplish through the rate structure.
Dave, if I could just comment on that.
Hey, Paul.
In your deliberations of how you're going to do that, just remember one thing. There's a lot of people today who live in Lincoln that are pretty happy. And they could care less whether it grows or stays the way it is. So, they know the nut that they have for a tax base now. They know the nut that they, so to increase their cost out of their pocket is where you have your hard choice to make. Because if you're going to drag another dollar out of their pocket, you better have a darn good reason.
Paul, I think that Butch spoke to a couple of those reasons, which are there are things that will come down the line eventually that regardless of any further development in this town, many of us on this call are going to have to address ourselves through paying for it. So
Well,
All right.
When
Ray,
they go to the voting booth,
Ray, any-
we'll
is
see,
Ray-
I guess.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Ray, did you have any other final comments?
Nope. I just wanted to get that last one on the table.
All right. Well, Ray, thank you. And Dave, thank you for being with us here tonight. I think this was productive.
OJ, I'm gonna ask Ray to stay on, and if you wouldn't mind going, I want to do a Riverfront Park
Yep, we'll
update.
do that
Dave
next.
doesn't need to stick around, and then we get Ray so he can sign off, and I don't know what the rest of your agenda looks like, but, well, we've got Ray there.
Yep, sounds good. All right, Dave, thank you very much.
I'm gonna jump off. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate the input. Take care.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so next on the agenda, we're going to move to, I guess, the town manager's report, but your first item is the Riverfront Park, and Ray's going to help bring us up.
Yeah, I just want to say, we completed the test pits on that site today. I think the last hole or two were dug. I think it's some pretty decent, relatively good news on the test down there. And also some no surprises, but I'll let Ray bring you guys up to speed on where that is at as of today. And it's just a status report on the progress down there.
Okay, thank you, Butch. Yeah, so I'll focus my comments on the subsurface investigations that we've completed. As Butch mentioned, we completed those today. So we did a series of test pits within the footprint of the fenced-in area, which is the Burndy hazardous waste site that was remediated years and years ago. And those test pits were more specifically to assess the geotechnical condition for load-bearing capacity, because that's where the parking lot's proposed to go. So those test pits came back. They came back favorable. I believe there was, in my discussion with Scott Carter from Novus, who did the observation, there was only one test pit where we hit material that was just in terms of its color was questionable. We think it's benign. We don't think it's a big issue. But all the other test pits, we hit clean fill material to a depth of at least 4, 5, 6 feet. So we're pretty confident just based on that information. We're going to get a final report from Novus. They're scheduled to get it to us in the next 3 weeks on the load bearing capacity of that location for the parking lot. But just, putting eyes on it, looking at a test pit in the field, it looks like that's not going to be an issue. We'll be able to bottom line is we'll probably be able to put the parking lot there as we envision it and as we've completed on the preliminary design. The next set of test pits that we did were outside the fenced-in area, and those test pits were for the soil mapping that's required for the alteration of terrain permit, because DES has told us that we need to mitigate the stormwater runoff from the parking lot. So what we're proposing there is what we had proposed before for the other location on the parking lot, was to either put in a rain garden or a stormwater infiltration chamber. So those test pits, while the material they were better than the test pits that we dug at the former parking lot location. We did not find any solid waste per se at most of them on the back end of the proposed parking lot. There was some material in the hole that was looked like it was ash. But we didn't hit any solid waste and certainly didn't have the load bearing capacity issues that we had at the old parking lot location. So it was, the best way I can put it was those test pits were more favorable than the ones we did at the former parking lot location, but we do have to do the soil analysis to make a determination as to whether we're dealing with any contaminants. Because the bottom line here is that we can't put the infiltration chamber into a location where there's soil contamination. The state won't allow us to do that. So, we won't know that status until we actually get the lab reports back on the soil analysis for them samples that Novus had taken. So the best way I can put it at this point, we're cautiously optimistic that it's not going to be a problem. Based on what we saw, but we need to confirm that with the laboratory analysis. The only place where we did get, when we test pitted, we did get fill and what I would call solid waste material was on the westerly side of the fence line and the proposed parking lot between the fence and the railroad tracks. That clearly is a fill area, and there is some solid waste in there. So obviously we're not going to be putting the stormwater practice at that location. So we're on either on the back end of the parking lot or on the easterly side of the parking lot, which is in, if you remember the concept plan, it's in the vicinity of where the skate park is being proposed. So, so that's the area that we're going to focus our attention on from a design standpoint. And again, Novus is going to get their report on that to us. We'll probably get the lab reports back, at least on a preliminary basis, in about 5 to 7 days, and then we get the final lab reports maybe 3 or 4 days after that, and then Novus is going to issue their report on their findings with respect to the environmental characteristics of that location. So it's good news, definitely good news on the parking lot in terms of its terms of the load bearing capacity. And again, if you remember the former parking lot site, we just had absolutely none. The backhoe sunk down to its axle. So so that's good news. And then we're cautiously optimistic. We're not going to have much of an issue to deal with to put in the stormwater infiltration chambers. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Well, good. Thank you. That's encouraging.
It is.
Yeah.
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 So we
So
could probably cut trees around Thanksgiving. Is that what you said?
I think that's optimistic, but we'll see. We did, and actually, Tim, if you go out there, you'll see we did cut a few
Oh, good. Oh,
to get
good.
in there.
Progress.
So, yep.
There's actually some trails. Yep.
Yeah. So the site is challenging and it remains challenging, but we're working our way through it. So
Excellent.
so that's
Thank
it. Good news.
Good. Thank you.
Okay.
OJ, the next thing on my agenda was formally appointment of your building committee. You have two.
Excuse me, Butch. You're all set with me?
I'm all set with you, Ray. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, Ray.
Hey, before we move on too fast, can we find out who is on iPhone 2 and who is on the phone so we have those names for the minutes?
Oh, yep.
Oh, thank you, Tammy.
iPhone 2.
iPhone 2. Can you unmute and let us know who you are for our minutes?
Kevin Sullivan.
Kevin Sullivan, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And the phone number ending in 2895?
Yeah, that's, I canceled that call and I dialed in on laptop.
Oh, perfect. Okay, thank
Jeff
you.
Aldridge.
Thank you.
Okay, so we well, I thought, I don't see one on mine, but we had John Hettinger was on and Al Poulin was on. And we have Jim Welch and Deb Salino, who I didn't see sign on tonight, but those are the members that have expressed interest, OJ, as well as I think we said a board member and myself would make up the building committee. If you're prepared, that's who's expressed interest in that committee.
Okay, so we have John Hettinger, Al Poulin, Jim Welch, Deb Salino,
Yep.
Butch, and a
Perfect.
board of selectmen.
Yep. So, and I think once you do that, that we can arrange a meeting and pick a chair and, or however the board wants to run, have the committee set an agenda and get going with that.
All right. Is there a board member who wants to, did we talk about this? Did we choose someone for the board?
I think we all expressed an interest in it, honestly.
I think I was willing to have one of you do it. Just because I'm on the water committee and would love to share that.
I would love to do it. We
Is,
can't hear you, Jane. If you're talking, we can't hear you.
yeah, Jane, I can't, yeah, there you go.
You're muted, Jane.
I know.
Oh, there we go.
Tammy had mentioned that you would be the best person to do it, OJ.
Oh, I did mention that. And that's when you said that you had a full plate. But I don't mind doing it. It sounds very interesting, actually. It's a great group of people to work with. I think it
I
would
don't
be.
remember saying I had a full plate, but that's okay. You can do it. Go for it.
I said OJ said he had a full plate.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I did.
I think it would be a great group of people to work with, and I wouldn't mind doing it at all.
All right, do we want to nominate then Butch, John, Al, Jim, Deb, and Tamara?
Are you all right with that, Jane? Does that
Yeah.
work for you?
Yeah.
Right.
All right, I'll make that motion.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
All right, there we go.
And the last thing I had was just another reminder that, two things. For everyone who will be reading this and who's listening tonight, because of the COVID situation, I've closed town hall to the public. We've got, it's pretty much, the town is aware, we did have a part-time employee test positive for COVID, and there was some secondary exposure. Town hall staff, including myself, since Saturday through today, we've all gone for COVID tests, and I'm happy to report, with the exception of 2, we've all come back negative. So, but anyway.
But with the exception of the 2, those tests just aren't back yet. They haven't tested.
They're not back yet.
They just
That's
don't have yet.
Right,
So-
that's an important clarification.
That's important to reflect. Okay. But as far as voting day tomorrow, we have town hall is set up. We, as luck would have it, our fogger arrived today.
Oh,
We
good.
have disinfected the whole town hall, the meeting room, and early in the morning, the hallway will be disinfected so folks can, so the poll folks and the voters can come in, and there will be limited staff in the building. Just because we just don't need that. And so voting day hopefully will go smoothly, and everybody that's working those polls can feel comfortable. And I think Kristen and Robert have done an awesome job have a plan to get folks in, vote, and get out, and masked up and stuff. So I just wanted to do that. And the other thing is just reminder, tax bills will be going out around November 4th with all the stuff, envelope stuffers that we wanted in there about short-term rental and stuff. So we're on track for that. So
You were gonna send us a copy of what's gonna go out? That
I
short-term
believe
rental
we were.
notice?
I think that got, because of all the goings on over the weekend, but we'll try to get that to you. Jane's coming in early in the morning, and I will see that is at least emailed to you folks so you have it,
That's good.
okay?
Yep.
And that's all I have, guys.
Thank you, Butch.
The only other thing that I had to ask about was the town treasurer. Any applications or interest or any?
We have not. So I'll put out another plea, if you will.
Big.
If not, I will get with municipal resources, and if we have to, I will get it to hire a treasurer to come in, and we'll just have to get a citizen of town to sign off on the audits, which we're allowed to do. You folks could appoint a hired person to do the job, so we don't get stuck. Okay, so if nobody steps up, that's probably what we'll have to do.
Let's, if we get to that point, let's talk about that.
Yep.
Although municipal resources is a great resource for that type of thing, there might be a local person capable and qualified to do it, but they don't live in Lincoln. They might work in
Okay.
this area or live in a neighboring town that would be good at doing it, just not a registered voter in Lincoln.
I'm just, I'm familiar with that group, but that would be awesome if one of you all know somebody, that would be perfect,
All right.
Yep.
All right. I did not have anything else, although in non-public tonight, last week we talked about a personnel issue and just wanted to get an update on that. And
Okay.
also, we talked last week about the CRVI lawsuit. And I know that you had a conversation with Peter Malia, and I'd like to talk about that.
Okay.
I have one thing before we go into non-public.
Go ahead.
You had asked me to reach out to Cheryl Reardon about the Kankski area, and relaying what our conversation was last week, and she relaying what Woodstock's conversation was the week prior to. And we pretty much came up with that both boards pretty much agree that to only open up season pass sales or any ticket sale, it's going to be all season pass. We're not going to do day tickets at all, to only Lincoln and Woodstock residents because of COVID this year, in an effort to keep our local kids safe. And then the only ski teams that will be practicing there at the Kank this year will just be Linwood ski team, and that's it, Linwood kids. Try to keep the Kank to just Linwood kids and our full-time year-round local residents.
Right. And I had talked to Butch last meeting, and you said you had said that would be okay legally, and you would check into it though, Butch. Did you mention it to Peter at all? Or I don't know if you had a chance over the week to vet it. It feels to me like, oy, and I'm okay with it, but I don't want to get any more legal stuff.
Yeah, I think, so two parts to your question. I haven't, because in talking with Tara and Tammy, it seemed like it was still in a big discussion.
Okay.
I will do that. But the other question is how do we identify full-time residents? I guess it would be driver's license or
Exactly.
something like that. And maybe, and we don't need to get Jay to come at night, but maybe, I don't know how they identify season pass holders. I just wanted to be industry consistent. That way there's no discrimination as best as we can. But I will check with legal.
That's good. Thank you.
To make sure that we're good. And obviously, Woodstock has different legal counsel than we do. I don't know if it's our call, and our call will trump, it will go forward. I can talk to you guys in non-public about that. But yes, I will.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Butch.
Yeah.
Okay. Jane, did you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay. Anyone from the public who has a comment, question?
Paul's raising.
Jose,
Okay, go ahead.
look, I understand the need to want to keep all our local children safe. But I got to tell you that I am very confused about this Kank resolution. All the local businesses here are inviting tourists in. All of the local residents are waiting on them, serving them in grocery stores. And I think it's absolutely the wrong thing to do, to single them out and not allow them to use the Kank when a lot of them are paying a lot of taxes in the town of Lincoln. I think we need to develop proper safety protocols like Luna's doing, but I still think that we should not be just segregating the population in Lincoln. We've invited these people here for years, and it's the wrong thing to do. And as a taxpayer, I just want you to know that.
I agree with Paul. I'll keep it short.
Jay, I'm not on that committee, but Jay, how do you just set limits then of first come, first serve, and we're at our max and that's it. How would, obviously we're a lot far smaller than you guys are, but how would you suggest the towns do that? Then if we,
Well, yeah, Paul, I mean, excuse me, Bush, there's several ways to do it. And one of them that Tammy and Jane and everyone's talking about is one of them, just limiting sales, limiting ticket sales or season pass sales. And you can do it that way. There is actually no restriction on uphill capacity for ski resorts. So we could, if we wanted to, have as many people here as we have in the past. Now, that's not what we're doing, just because that's not how we're looking to run Loon this year. We've got a lot of operational hurdles to deal with, and we're trimmed quite a bit back on how many people we're giving tickets to and selling season passes to, and who's coming when and how buses are running and so on and so forth. The Kank runs much simpler. You've got one indoor space and you've got one lift, and you've got to open a bunch of open outdoor space. And I mean, that's where it comes to for me. If people can be socially distant outside, both in the lift line or on the hill, then you should be able to handle them. How many of the Kank can actually handle that? That's a great question. I think you got to be careful about how many tickets you're giving out. So I don't disagree with the idea of selling a limited amount of passes. I like Paul, think you have people who pay to run that place, and if they are that interested that they think they would like to have a pass there, then just create a time for them to do that. And when the window closes, and everybody else is out of luck. I would think that the local folks like my family, who would use that place on a nightly basis, we're going to go and buy a pass when the passes are available for sale. And if we miss out, that's our bad. So I didn't really answer to all of your question there, Butch. Sorry, because it's quite a bit complicated. And Tammy and I have, Tara and I have been talking a little bit, and we can talk some more to help figure out the safety protocols some more. The good piece is that, because of its size and how you arrive at the parking lot and all that, it is controllable. It's just a matter of how many people do we want to have controlling it.
yeah, thank you. I mean, I am just worried about the liability issues on discrimination, and that we're as fair as we can. And so,
Yeah, me too.
other than that, there's Tara and people that have worked there for years know what that hill will handle, and I certainly don't. So I'm going to rely on them to deal with that. It's more to what Paul said, and that we're treating people as fairly as we can, and we can defend our system, whatever that system is. And thanks for your input.
I mean, and if I could just compare it, again, it's like a restaurant. The restaurant doesn't just say, we're only going to allow locals in. There's locals that are serving you, and we're only going to allow locals in because we're taking care of everybody in Lincoln Woodstock. It's not the way it works. Restaurant has people that come in, there's locals that serve them. I mean, we can draw all sorts of comparisons, but I mean, the bottom line is that we're all in this together, and we just got to figure out a way to make it work.
You're comparing apples and oranges there. Local residents are far different from our kids skiing at the Kank. Far, far different.
Tammy, I can tell you one thing, that the kids skiing at the Kank are a lot less susceptible to the COVID than the older people who are going to restaurants. So, look, like I said, we can argue about it all we want, but let's just figure out a way to make it work so it's fair to everybody. Isn't that what it's all about? Being fair to everybody?
Well, I think, as far as I'm on Tammy with this piece of it too, there is, if you live in a community for so long, perhaps not for you, Paul, but for other people that have a certain ownership into the community and feel ownership towards the community, where a lot of us aren't part of the businesses nor in the service industry. And so, there's equity there. There's a different side to everything, right? So I get their feeling. I get it. And living in Woodstock and Lincoln for over 40 years, 48 years now or something ridiculous, but I get where Tammy's coming from, and I get where the locals are coming from. So I get that side of it. But then again, it has to be, I don't want to be charged with discrimination. That's all. I don't want the town to have to pay any more attorney fees. No offense if attorney's on here, but yeah, so that's kind of the way I think. I don't know.
All right. I understand that there's two sides to that issue. You know, I have reservations about limiting this to just residents versus taxpayers. You know, I don't think we need to open it up to everyone in the world. But if you're a taxpayer, you have an investment in this community, and the Kank is part of that. But with that being said, I would, you know, I understand that we're going to be limiting the number of people there in total. I just think we need to be careful about how we do that, whether it's just by where you live, or if, like Jay alluded to, it's you know, these are the dates that you can buy the pass, and if you miss out, you miss out, period. But
The biggest
you know,
fear,
what's that?
the biggest fear is if we do that, we have so many second homeowners that live in and around Boston and Providence and even New York, and that are all hotspots, and they travel back and forth. Now, the limit on a daily basis for skiing there, now again, after school and on 3 to 5, Monday through Friday, is not going to be a big issue. However, Saturdays and Sundays, especially crossover Saturdays and Sundays when vacation weeks roll around and whatnot, the limit's going to be right around 50. So say the first people there in the morning are 45 people that come from Boston or Providence or New York or anywhere else that is a hotspot area, that work in the community all week down there. Their kids are in school. Then they come up here. Now, this 45 of them are second homeowners. And then 5 of our kids get in there and get to ski, which, whatever, it's fine. The numbers is not the thing that bothers me. However, now those 5 kids end up COVID positive. 4 of them are asymptomatic, so they're still in school. Now our school is shut down. And not only that, is that the amount of grandparents that are now watching kids after school due to COVID is almost double from what I understand. And so now our whole community is sick because we didn't try to stay in our own little bubble. Now we're doing that at schools. We're trying to stay in cohorts, keep these kids together, don't let them mingle with all of the other kids in school, keep them in their groups. But now we're not going to do that at the Kank. That doesn't make any sense at all, especially with the uptick in cases in our community lately. It just didn't make any sense at all. If we're going to keep our kids safe, we've got to keep them safe, period.
Close the borders. Close the borders, Tammy. Then you don't have any of them.
I can't close any borders, Paul. Go
All
tell
right.
the governor.
So look, we're not going to be voting on this or deciding on this tonight. We've certainly heard people's differing opinions. You know, I know that you and you, Tammy, and Cheryl and Tara are still working on proposals and when sales are even going to be open. When's the earliest you're starting to even think of selling season passes?
Pretty much any time. I mean, she usually opens it up shortly before Thanksgiving.
Tara and I had that conversation, and she likes to get going prior to Thanksgiving. So
right, shortly
we've got
before
a little bit of time, but I think it'll work. It'll work out. I think we're getting hung up on we're a lot of assumptions. We're assuming we're going to get overrun with out-of-state skiers, and that could be. That very well could be. But
our summer and our swimming areas. I mean,
Right.
it's going to happen.
Again, you're going to limit the sales to a specific period. And how is someone who's coming up for February vacation from Boston going to know about that next month? I mean, if they've come here year after year and they're regular Kank people, they might find out about it. If they're just sitting in Boston, not even knowing where they're going to go for their winter vacation, they're probably not going to buy a pass.
I think you'd be surprised, especially if there's one person watching this meeting and going, all right, I'm going to pay attention. And then it's going to be on Facebook, and then it's going to be everywhere. So no, I think you'd be surprised.
I
Honestly.
think I agree with Tammy.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. They know every nook and cranny, most of them.
I think the only way we're going to keep our kids safe, keep our school open as long as we possibly can, is to limit it to our local community and keep our local community safe. It's 1 year. It's 1 year. If you can't ski at the Kank this year, I'm sorry. We're doing the best we can to keep our local community safe. And if that means that this year you're not going to be able to come up on February vacation where you can ski at the Kank a couple of times, then I'm sorry. Next year we'll welcome you in, provided this pandemic is under control.
Tammy,
Good point, Tammy.
I don't want to, Tammy, I don't want to belabor this, but has the committee set a max per day number for the slope?
There is no committee. It is our recreation director, and Tara has suggested 50.
Okay, but whatever the number is, if you go with that, and whenever you start selling,
No, that's a daily capacity, not a total.
right, but if you have season pass sales that exceed that by a percentage, then your ski area is sold out for the winter, whether people show up or not, right?
No, Tara went into that
Yeah.
explanation
Not
on that.
as that.
Yeah, that some people might only come 3 or 4 times a year, but they'll buy a season pass. Or
Right.
they come and they just do 5 runs in the morning and go home. Or they don't even show up until after church on Sunday, or, so.
Or they only come on Sunday afternoon, or you've got the kids that only
Right.
come Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday after school, or there's the other kids that are only
Right.
there Saturday morning. So it's different,
I think it's two different decisions. One is what's the number, and if it's 50, it's 50. But the bigger question is, who do we sell tickets, season passes to, and during what time frame? Can
And
we
with that,
set?
I'm
Can
out.
we?
It's out of my wheelhouse. I'm only worried about liability. So that's why you
So-
guys.
So with that in mind, does the do we want to meet with the Woodstock board and Tara and make a decision on who can buy season passes?
Let's wait until hear what Butch says. I would like to hear what Butch's response is with the attorney first.
Well, yeah,
Well,
that's.
do we want right? But do we want to set
Yeah.
up the meeting with
Yes.
Woodstock?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Next Monday night with us, or next Tuesday night with them? And I assume we'll do it by Zoom, no matter who hosts it.
Right.
Right.
You'll know by then, Butch, correct?
I'm absolutely going to make the call
Okay.
tomorrow.
So we'll be good with that.
And then I would invite people who have comments or opinions, which I know there's some people here tonight, that they join us for that joint meeting and express it then. We're not going to be making a decision tonight, so I'd like to just end discussion on this and just get a date set and have, if you have a point to make it in front of the 6 people who are going to make the decision, not just the 3 of us.
Good idea.
So Butch, if we can get in touch with Judy and set up a date, either us at their meeting or them at our meeting.
We'll get an email out tomorrow. Yep.
All right. Any other public participation?
Yes, hello, this is Jeff Holdridge. I'm here to join in this meeting to express my concern about the short-term rental issue that was brought to my attention as a unit owner at the lodge at Lincoln Station to me last week from the Condominium Association.
Okay.
I'm a unit owner for 25 years. It's a 1-bedroom, 540 square foot unit, and I pay $910 annually for my tax bill. I'm surprised, concerned of what I was notified that after talking to Jane Leslie, and I appreciate Jane making me aware of this meeting today to be able to join in. I thank you for that opportunity. I don't think I qualify to pay a $50 annual fee based upon how my unit is being used. Minimal personal use and short-term use, less than 30 days, is through the on-site rental management company. Jane came back to me after I questioned her twice last week by email, and she said, it appears I qualify for type 1. And I disagree with that finding.
I don't have the ordinance in front of me, but it seems like that would qualify.
There you go, grab one.
Thank you, Ron.
My view is a short-term rental, in my case, goes through the on-site management company. People check in at the desk. They pay fees, taxes to rent my unit. The other use is by me personally and my family, which is minimal use per year. So I ask, why am I being charged $50 when I'm paying taxes? And it's my short-term use less than 30 days is the town is collecting taxes for that use.
Want me to read it off, OJ?
Sure.
Okay, under
Thank you.
STR type 1, definition is STR type 1 is owner, operator occupied or associated with an owner occupied managed residential unit building.
Which that would be an owner, owned by a single owner, but associated with a managed building.
Within the development. Yep.
Yep.
And then STR type 2 is not owner occupied, which disqualifies him on that one already. I'll read the whole thing. STR type 2 is not owner or operator occupied and is not associated with an owner occupied management residential unit building. STR type 3 is owner or operator occupied or associated at least part-time. So it does sound like STR type 1 is appropriate in this case here, I believe.
Yeah, OJ, and if I may,
Yeah.
to Mr. Holdridge's point, one of the things that the reason for getting a handle on the short-term rental is especially in the case of the Nordic, we have to go back to the original planning board approval for that building, and the building has morphed into short-term rentals where Mr. Holdridge doesn't seem to be overusing it. However, in the cumulative, it appears that building may far exceed what was originally approved for occupancy, and which raises parking issues and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that, there's a bigger picture than just the $50 fee. In fact, many folks that are calling in are laughing at the minimal fee that we're charging for the short-term rental approval. So it's a bigger question than you probably need to deal with tonight, but it's my opinion, Mr. Holdridge, the way he's using his unit does fit our type 1. So.
Yeah, and I understand your point of view there, but I believe that it does certainly fit our ordinance as a type 1 rental unit. And not only you, but the many people who use their units like that are basically converting a residential use unit into a commercial unit by using it to generate income, just as a hotel, motel, that type of commercial enterprise would do. And we're just trying to get a hold of just the explosion of the number of these types of units that are in our town. And although yours is a managed operation, the whole building, there are many, many of these where it's unmanaged and really falling on the town to manage because of the disruption, whether it be noise or parking or campfires or whatever. But there's been just so many problems in the town. I shouldn't say so many. There's been a number of problems in the town with the short-term rentals that we needed to do something about it and treat them as a commercial operation rather than just an extension of a residence. And we really felt that the $50 was pretty minor in the scheme of things. And like Butch said, you know, there are some towns that are charging. First of all, there's a lot of towns who don't even allow this, and then I shouldn't say a lot. There's a handful of towns who have put in regulations that either don't allow it or very much restrict it as far as either what locations it has to be in certain zones or how many nights you can rent it. We've not done any of that. We've not, restricted the use, the number of nights, the location, but we just want to know where they are and have someone to hold accountable for it. And that's really the goal. And the $50 fee barely pays the town's costs and just managing the knowledge of where these short-term rentals are.
It's not about the $50. $50, that's in my pocket right now. It's the principal. Here I have 25-year owner, high tax rate. I consider it a high tax rate. Why do I pay taxes? While the short-term rental per year, less than 30 days with the on-site management company is collecting taxes and giving it back to the town. So it is a commercial. It's a combined commercial. It is a commercial issue, in my view. I know I used the term cash grab, and maybe that was a little blunt, but in my email to Jane, but it is a commercial issue.
OJ, could I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Jeff, I'd like to know why you consider Lincoln's tax rate high, and where do you come from?
I come from Pennsylvania.
And what is your tax rate there?
I don't know what the actual rate is. I have a 3,000 square foot house and I pay $6,000 a year.
That's not that bad.
Well, break it down. 540 square foot, one bedroom unit at the lodge, I'm paying 910.
Welcome to Lincoln, New Hampshire.
Well, it's a very small unit, and it's about the same if you break it out unit pricing per mill. How are we going to break it out?
So,
We have a great town and we welcome you.
yeah, and I know everybody has different opinions on what's a high rate or low rate. In New Hampshire, we're certainly near the lower end of the spectrum with our tax rate.
I disagree. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to express my concerns, and have a nice night.
Sure, you too. Thanks for joining us. All right, with that, I'm going to make a motion. We go into non-public to discuss one personnel issue in the CRVI lawsuit.
OJ, do we know who Alfred's iPad is for the minutes?
I believe that's Al Poulin.
Oh, gotcha. Thank you. I'll second your motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you all for joining.